We were texting before the show and chatting before the show, and Mario caught a little something from Frank Saravalli as it pertains to Jake McCabe.
Yeah. So, we've been talking about the Blackhawks potentially having a defenseman on the move, Connor Murphy, Jake McCabe, one of those guys, and it looks like now this is all qualified as Frank Saravalli's information, but it looks like Jake McCabe could be getting a lot of interest on the trade market. Saravalli reported that Edmonton has called, the LA Kings have called, and the Toronto Maple Leafs have called about McCabe and Murphy as well, but McCabe more or less seems to be the bigger target I think with good reason. And what we've been hearing about McCabe is, he has a 7-team no trade list. And why 7 teams? Well, there's 7 teams in Canada. And this is according to Saravalli. This isn't silly make it up. Toronto is not part of that 7-team list. So it is not all of the Canadian teams, in fact, that are on McCabe's list. So look, if I'm the Maple Leafs, a team that needs help on defense, and they want to come to Chicago, and the Kyle D's want to make up from last year's trade deadline snafu. Look, McCabe makes all the sense for the Maple Leafs to go and help their defensive depth. He's a guy that could play pretty much in any NHL top 4, and he has 2 years left on his contract after this season at $4 million. He is well worth that. But the Blackhawks are going to have some money to work with, or some salary cap space to work with. You can only retain on a certain amount of contracts. I think it's 3. So depending on what happens with Kane and Tays, this may or may not be an option. But they could retain on Jake McCabe, make him $2 million player for Toronto, like a team that needs help with the cap. Could you get a first-round pick out of them for that? A top 4 defenseman at $2 million for the next 2 years?
I mean, if you're
I think
the
that's
Leafs,
a very intriguing
your
option.
window's now. Austin Matthews is a free agent in 2 years. Not saying they can't re-sign him, but it's going to be tough. They've got some big decisions to make.
Well, it's Matthews or Marner. One of the two.
They're losing one of them.
Yeah.
And Nylander, too.
Yeah, so this is the time. And draft picks are great and are important and all those things, but the goal here is to win the Stanley Cup. And this is the Leafs' best chance to win a Stanley Cup probably in my lifetime, or at least in my hockey fandom, bless you. This is their best shot. And draft picks be damned, man. They have the longest cold streak in hockey. They are arguably the biggest and most popular franchise in the game. This is their shot. And bringing in Jake McCabe for $2 million for 2 years, that's a no-brainer to me.
That sounds like the same conversation we had about Marc-Andre Fleury in the Maple Leafs last year, and Kyle Dubas proved he didn't have the sack to pull off that kind of deal. But this year could be different because it's the last year of his contract.
He's a lame duck right now.
And he could say, screw it, I don't give an F about the future around here because I probably won't be back unless I win a Stanley Cup. So, that being said, he's probably going to be a little more gutsy this time around. However, we need to stop the whole, we're going to get Matthew Nyes for Jake McCabe. That's not going to happen.
No.
I mean, I know Saravalli said that, like, in a report that they have interest in McCabe, comma, Matthew Nyes is not untouchable. Those
it
are
was
not,
2 separate thoughts. Yes.
They were not.
Paragraph.
If he's willing to give Matthew Nyes for Jake McCabe, they need to, fire him immediately because that...
No, they don't. They need to make that trade and then fire him.
True.
Yeah, exactly.
But, so I know, they saw McCabe and Nyes in the same sentence, and people were like, hey...
Separate thoughts, yeah.
That would be great. Yeah, that would be an amazing deal, but it's not going to happen. You want to do some crazy stuff where you figure out a way to add a Jonathan Taves and a Jake McCabe, maybe.
I don't think you can
Patrick
make that money
Kane.
work.
No,
No. But yeah,
I know people saw the Nyes stuff mentioned in the same tweet as McCabe, and some people got excited. It's it's not going to happen.
That'd be great.
Well,
Nyes would be a guy that would be traded for a Bo Horvat.
Yeah.
Somebody like that, not your second line defender.
Yeah, and I think, again, this was Saravalli kind of putting his guesstimations on things, but he was saying that if the Blackhawks were to retain and Toronto were to make a deal for McCabe at $2 million per year with retained money, Blackhawks could probably get a first-round pick out of that. If there was no retained money, you could look at Toronto giving up a second-round pick and a B-level prospect. Now, that's not Matthew Nyes,
right,
but maybe a guy who's playing locally right now, Nick Moldenhauer, who we liked from the Chicago Steel going into this year's draft. Like, that could be someone that the Blackhawks could get in that kind of deal, a second-round pick, a mid-level prospect, and make it worth.
So that's
a while.
interesting, and the definition of B-level depends on who you talk to.
For sure,
Because I think there are some people that would say Lucas Reichel is a B-level prospect. He's not a sure thing. Looks good so far. Hasn't totally proven it at the NHL level yet.
Mm-hmm.
Probably doesn't project to superstar status. Probably good to very good status.
Yeah.
Right. So would that be considered a B-level prospect? If that's the case, yes. I'd almost rather do that, a second and that, than a first.
Right, 2 assets instead of 1.
Yeah.
But if it's a first this year,
there's still lottery tickets though.
Right.
How many times have we gone back and looked at first rounds, through the years and said, "Oh,
it's also currency though. I mean, if you were to make this kind of deal, and you make it so a team like Toronto or Edmonton or LA or the teams that have been reportedly really interested in Jake McCabe, if you were to get a first round pick out of those teams, you're talking about late teens, 20s, depending on where they end up in the postseason. But you could package that with Tampa's pick, two picks in the 20s to get into the early teens. Like, you could do something like that. Like, there's a lot of flexibility that Kyle Davidson could have.
Can you imagine like 2 top 10 picks maybe in this draft? It's realistic.
It's the possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
2 top 10 picks, like, let's ride. Like, let's go. Like, that gets me excited.
Yeah, I know. I kind of like the idea of a prospect and a second round pick, because you already got 2 first round or second round picks, so that's 3 in the second round. So again, you could start packing those. You could package 2 of those 3. If there's a guy early second round, you have to have. He's on your board. And you could package 2 of those picks to move up and then get the prospect. Because at some point, as we've said, the Hawks need to start getting guys that are quicker that are going to be closer to being actual NHL players than guys you take in the first through 6th round this year. You got to get guys that could play for Rockford next year and possibly the Blackhawks as soon as next year or the following. You just got to start getting some actual prospects that can be in your organization playing professionally in the next year.
Yeah, I agree with that. But what's interesting about the Saravalli report is we could really be looking at a scenario where Jake McCabe is the Hawks' biggest trade deadline asset. Because when you factor in the low salary, the term, all that stuff, like Patrick Kane, sure, is the biggest name for sure, right? But it's going to take a lot to get him. You're going to have to – he's done after this year. You got to make the cap money fit, so you're limited to how many teams can afford him, not to mention limited to how many teams he wants to go to. Right? So that limits the value in return. So there's a shot that, like, Jake McCabe could bring back the biggest haul of this trade deadline, which would be crazy to think about, but there seems to be massive demand for Jake McCabe, and I would love to know who that 7th team is.
Right,
the non-Canadian team.
If it's 6 Canadian teams, not Toronto and
pretend
someone
it's
else.
The Blues.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's St. Louis.
Could it be St. Louis?
Maybe it's Buffalo. Maybe he doesn't want to go back there.
It could
been
be.
there, done that.
Yeah, been there, done that.
I mean, hey,
basically
would he
a
want to go back
Canadian
now
team.
when they're like
maybe
in a playoff?
I don't know.
Who knows?
Well,
But
we should maybe try and find that out, who that other team is.
yes, let's ask him.
I tried a little bit today to reach out to some sources, and from what everyone's very tight-lipped right now.
Sure.
Which is understandable. So
It's probably one of those things we'll find out after the trade was made.
yes.
Right.
When it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah, it's just fun, man. It's a fun time of year. I love transactions. I love drafts. I love free agency and trade deadlines. This one's going to be – this is the biggest one they've had in decades.
In a very long time.
This is just going to dictate the future of their franchise.